views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. If anybody asks the question, what is the Social Justice Forums all about? Well, it's an opportunity to take the time to spend some time dealing with the inequities that many people face in our community. We talk about injustice. We talk about evening the playing field. We talk about having civic engagement, and then also providing a deeper understanding about many of the issues that sometimes we just really don't know all about. So we encourage you to stay tuned. The Social Justice Forum starts right now. And welcome back to the show. The Our Money campaign is an issue-based advocacy campaign seeking to mainstream the academy insights of modern monetary theory to solve some of our nation's greatest social and economic challenges. The organization seeks to build a diverse grassroots bipartisan movement, endeavoring to address things as disparities in employment, wages, healthcare, education, and household debt. Joining us now is the founder of Our Money, Dr. Delman Coates, and we thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Coates.
Thank you so much, Daren. I'm so honored to be on with you today.
Well, listen, it's important that you are with us because this is a conversation that needs to be had. And when we talk about financial literacy, important, right? And really making the way. So give us a little bit about your organization and the work that you do.
Well, thank you. Well, the Our Money campaign seeks to build public support for a set of broad-based federal spending policies that are designed to address the inequities and the disparities that we see in the country around employment, healthcare, public education. Those three policies are federal job guarantee, federal funding of public education, and free public healthcare. The sort of twist to the Our Money campaign is we seek to build public support for what I regard as the biggest, baddest, boldest public policy priorities right now, but we seek to do it through the funding mechanism informed by modern monetary theory. Now, modern monetary theory, or MMT for short, Daren, is a school of economics that has been growing in the academy for the last 30, 35 years and has been gaining a great deal of traction in the financial press and in Congress. Now, you may be wondering, you and your listeners may be wondering, well, what's the big deal about modern monetary theory? Well, MMT changes the way we tend to think about how are we going to pay for these big public priorities. I mean, you know that the foundational question of public finance as it relates to public policies is where's the money going to come from? Now, most policymakers and conventional economists assume that the federal government's ability to spend is capped or limited by how much revenue that it brings in. We sort of call it the household model of economics. Like, think about it, your business or your home needs a source of revenue first in order to spend, and it's deemed financially irresponsible to spend more than you bring in revenue.
Right.
Well, most mainstream economists, liberal, conservative, left, right, and their economic advisors tend to assume that the federal government's budget works like a household that needs revenue first in order to spend. And most often that revenue is thought of in terms of coming from tax revenue. So what mainstream economists tend to do is they sort of calculate how much revenue is coming in, and they assume that the federal government's ability to spend on public education, healthcare, job creation, the environment, state and local infrastructure is capped by tax revenue. Well, MMT says, and there are a range of economists who are on our advisory council. If you go to our website, ourmoneyus.org, our economists help us to understand that the federal government does not operate like a household. It is the currency issuer, not the currency user, right? Mm-hmm. As homeowners, as individuals, we use currency, but the federal government creates what we use as money. That means its ability to spend on the things that we so desperately need is not capped by revenue. And just think, Daren, about how we funded the stimulus over the last 15 months. We spent an unprecedented amount of money in the last 15 months on stimulus in response to COVID. $5 trillion. There's even proposals for another 1 to 2 trillion. Bezos wasn't taxed. Jay-Z, Beyonce, people making over $400,000 weren't taxed to fund that federal spending. The federal government merely created the money to fund that national priority.
Yeah.
So what MMT says is that the cap for spending, responsible spending by the federal government, is not revenue, but inflation. And as long as we don't exceed the inflation target, the federal government has the capacity to create all of the money we need to address our greatest social and economic challenges.
Talking about the civil rights movement, because that was huge, right? And we know that there is unfinished work that's done in the civil rights movement in terms of, listen, when it comes to finances, economic agenda, some things we left on the table, and you want to address that unfinished policy.
Well, many people today are hitting the streets all across America in response to the range of social, racial, and economic issues we're facing today. We're trying to continue that legacy. But what many people fail to realize, as you just mentioned, Daren, is that economic justice is the unfinished work of the civil rights movement. And that when Dr. King, when his life was taken from him prematurely, he was focused on the importance of connecting the social realities of the country to issues of economic inequality. Think about the March on Washington. The full name of the march was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Some kind of way the jobs and freedom part of the march has kind of gotten lost to history. But the reason Dr. King and other leaders led 250,000 people to the mall in Washington was to fight for a policy solution called a federal job guarantee. The goal was to eliminate involuntary unemployment in America. Because as long as people do not have economic security, as long as we manage the economy on the backs of the unemployed, then people will not have the economic wherewithal to provide for themselves, to have stable communities and have a stable society. Now, what do I mean balance the economy on the backs of the unemployed? Most people, Daren, don't realize that the way we do monetary policy in America assumes that we will always have 4 to 5% unemployment nationally, even in a good economy. Did you hear that? 4 to 5% of the American people will always be unemployed, even in a good economy. That means that in Black and brown communities and poor communities, we're always going to have double-digit unemployment because we leave the issue of employment up to the private sector. A federal job guarantee says that people deserve a right to a dignified job at a livable wage. And so a federal job guarantee is a public option for jobs so that we can eliminate the scourge of unemployment, the unnecessary scourge of unemployment in our society by providing dignified employment for every American that wants one. And it's funded through the mechanism of not having to take from one area of the budget to give it to another. It's not about taxing the rich or people who make over a certain amount of money. It's about the federal government harnessing the power of money creation to address this very important, critical need.
You're talking about an interesting concept, though. You're talking about not taking from one to give to the other. I mean, that's huge.
Yes, MMT is so critically and powerful, and it's important for those of us who are concerned about economic justice, because I hear all the time, even progressives use this idea that the federal government has to defund in order to fund, that we have to take money from the military budget in order to fund community centers and public education and healthcare, that we have to take money and obtain money from the rich and the wealthy in order to fund other public priorities. Now, MMT is clear that there is a role for taxation for the federal government, but the federal government, which we distinguish from state and local governments, does not have to tax in order to spend. When we go to war, Daren, God forbid if we had to go to war tomorrow, no member of Congress would say, hold on, we can't spend this until we figure out where the money is going to come from before we go to war. No, we harness the power of money creation, and we do it through the monetary fiscal policy mechanism called deficit spending. Deficit spending is actually good for the American people because when the federal, that leaves more surplus in the pockets of the American people. That's what the stimulus was all about. And so we should be pushing for more responsible net public money creation, which is deficit spending, to address disparities in public education. Just imagine right now, Daren, if rather than funding public education 90% through state and local tax dollars, we funded public education fully, completely, gave teachers raises, upgraded the infrastructure, facilities, and campuses of all of our schools, and funded it through federal spending, the same way we fund going to war. If we can harness the power of money creation to drop bombs in foreign lands and to shoot bullets in foreign lands against people of color, we can harness that same power for books and school buildings for our children and our young people and our communities right here at home.
Well, the biggest challenge that many people in New York City are talking about is that of public education, because when you look at public education the way that it is right now, it seems as though teachers are spending more money on their own to buy supplies. You've got classrooms that are overcrowded, and you've got a lack of necessary resources. You've got programs being cut, music, arts, sports, these things and the like. Public education definitely taking a hit, but under your way, public education can definitely see a significant turnaround.
It's a national problem. And the tragedy is it's totally unnecessary. You may wonder, if the federal government has the power to create money for the things that we need, why aren't we doing it? Well, the reason that we aren't doing it is because the financial sector benefits when state and local governments, when individuals rely on money created through private bank lending rather than public spending. So the financial sector is incentivized to have the public, to have society relying on bank credit when your state or your city has to float or issue bonds to fund school construction, to build roads and bridges, when we have to take out credit cards to just get by. And so the financial sector is incentivized by having an economy that relies on bank credit rather than an economy that relies on public spending. We could solve the crisis today in New York, in public education, in healthcare, in unemployment, in the economy, to address our greatest existential threat right now, and that's climate change and our environmental crisis. We can solve all of our greatest challenges by changing the way we think about money. We never have a problem harnessing the power of the public purse to bail out banks, to bail out corporations, to go to war. We need to harness that same power to address the war in education, the war in healthcare, because if we don't, our families are at risk. Our communities are at risk. We will continue to force people into jails when we don't guarantee jobs. And the only way to solve this is to harness the power of the public purse. We do not have a money crisis. Money is the one thing that is not scarce in society. And as long as we don't exceed the threshold of inflation, the federal government can address all of our state and local priorities by harnessing the power of the public purse.
You make it sound so easy. So the question is, why is it so hard to do?
Well, as I mentioned, I think it's important for people to understand that historically, the historic tension in nations has been around who is going to create the money. Will it be private interest or will it be public interest? And private interests have always been successful in delegitimizing the role of the public sector. Think about how people think about public education, public health care. So the private sector has historically won the battle in delegitimizing the role of the public sector by hiding behind dog whistles like, oh, that's socialism. Oh, you guys are anti-capitalism. You guys are anti-individual industry. And so we have to change the way we think about and understand money. And I'm really excited today. Just a few weeks ago, the chair of the House Budget Committee, Chairman John Yarmuth, had an interview on C-SPAN I encourage your listeners to look it up, in which he talked about the importance of the economic framework of modern monetary theory, changing the way we think about the capacity of the federal government to spend money on the things that we need. And right now, we're locked into this household model that assumes that the federal government's ability to spend is capped by revenue. It is the common sense way of thinking about a budget, but modern monetary theory helps us to understand that the federal government is not like a household. It creates the money. It doesn't use money. And so therefore it has a much broader capacity to spend money on the things that we desperately need today.
So talk to us a little bit about what you're working on right now. Presently, I know that you're got your feet and your hands, should say hands in a whole lot of irons, but talk to us about what you're working on now.
The one policy solution that we're going around the country educating people about is a federal job guarantee. On February the 17th, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley presented a federal job guarantee resolution. The goal of a federal job guarantee, as I said before, is to address the unnecessary circumstance of there being unemployment in America. We're trying to raise awareness with activists, civil rights, and faith leaders about continuing this unfinished work of Dr. King. Coretta Scott King, Daren, led 1.2 million people in rallies and marches in the 70s in support of a federal job guarantee. The late Vernon Jordan advocated for a federal job guarantee as a part of his leadership with the National Urban League. We have got to have advocates and people on the ground demanding that their members of Congress support a federal job guarantee. It is the only way we're going to strengthen our families, make sure that policymakers don't continue to balance the economy on the backs of the unemployed. What happens right now whenever unemployment starts to dip, in their minds, too low? Once it starts to get below 4% or 3.5%, they start thinking about other measures to cool off the economy, so they say, by perhaps raising interest rates, all designed to give us more unemployment, because it's based on an outdated model that assumes that if we have true full employment in America, that'll cause inflation. It has been discredited, and we can no longer accept an economy where we balance the economy on the backs of those who are unable to find a job. And so we're pushing for a federal job guarantee, and we're pushing for hearings in Congress that call for the budget committees in the House and the Senate to clarify the full extent of the federal government's spending capacity. And we're calling on the House Finance Committee and the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committees to reassess the unfounded connection between unemployment and inflation so that we can have a true full employment economy.
Talk to me about that, because when you talk about unemployment and inflation, yes, the two are linked to be going hand in hand, but you see it how?
It's the greatest myth in economics right now that has been discredited. It's called the NAIRU, or the natural rate of unemployment. In the past, there was this curve called the Phillips curve, which assumed that if too many people have a job, that if unemployment gets too low, then that will necessarily trigger inflation. It's why the Federal Reserve had its dual mandate, and it was the watered down compromise of Coretta Scott King and others in the 70s who were pushing for full employment. They said, well, we will have full employment, but we'll balance it with price stability. This is a thoroughly discredited premise. We've had chairmen of the Fed, like Chairman Jerome Powell, that have talked about we really need to reassess this model, this assumption. But the Fed right now does not have the tools to get us to full employment. The answer to get us to full employment is through fiscal policy, and that can only come from members of Congress passing legislation that guarantees full employment. And here's why a federal job guarantee is so helpful and critical, Daren. A federal job guarantee shifts our thinking from stimulus to automatic stabilizers. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, we've had $5+ trillion in stimulus spending. But what happens when that stimulus spending works its way through the economy and works its way through people's pockets? We then have to go back to Congress and beg for more stimulus money. That's what we're doing right now.
Right.
A federal job guarantee is far superior when it comes to public spending because it shifts from stimulus to automatic stabilizers. The spending for it is guaranteed, it's automatic, a lot like unemployment benefits, which frees us from the House or who's leading the Senate. Why should our needs, the needs of the American people to provide for their families, be held hostage to who's leading the Senate or who's leading the House? A federal job guarantee is a far superior way of doing public spending in a way that provides us economic security and stability.
So when we talk about really looking at unemployment right now, we know that unemployment is really huge. And in New York City, we know that it's a real crisis right now. Federal spending, from your perspective, definitely can help in terms of dealing with the unemployment crisis, correct? And
Yeah,
as we're talking about unemployment and shifting that money, what you're saying is a lot of public participation, a lot of public awareness, and that's what our show's about, right? How to get some people civically engaged and really raising their voice. You're saying making sure that you're letting other people know, or your congressional leaders, senators, that there needs to be a shift.
The problems that you face in New York City, Westchester County, Rockland County, Nassau County, the problems that we face at the state and local level emanate from the lack of leadership that's happening at the national level. A federal job guarantee helps address the state and local unemployment situation because while it's federally funded, it's administered at the state and local level. Look, you in the state of New York and in your cities, you know the needs that you have, as it relates to roads and bridges that need to be rebuilt, the funding that needs to go towards public education, the hospitals that need to be remodeled and redesigned, the community centers that need to be provided, the programs that you need. Your city or your county or your state is always going to be capped by how much revenue it can bring in. It's going to put that tax burden on individuals. The federal government does not have that constraint. It does not have that revenue constraint. So a federal job guarantee, while it is federally funded, but administered at the state and local level to address state and local priorities, to provide a dignified job for every American who wants one, to address the issues that you have in your community. It is a far superior way of addressing local and state priorities than thinking about how can we figure out how to do the best that we can with the little bit of tax revenue that we have at the state and local level.
Delman, let me ask this question here. How does this delve into healthcare? Can healthcare be affected by this?
There's no doubt about it. Our campaign is supporting federal funding of healthcare. Many of you may remember during the Democratic presidential debates that whenever the healthcare debate came up, the candidates on the stage debated, where's the money gonna come from? We have snippets of the back and forth about one plan being too expensive, then another plan being regarded as acceptable because it's more affordable. Well, here's the thing about modern monetary theory. The federal government can fund them all, right? The federal government can provide free public health care and can allow people to keep their individual or private health insurance if they desire, because the federal government has the capacity to build new hospitals in every community, to make sure that people should not die, Daren. People should not become bankrupt because of the sin of becoming sick. This is a tragedy in America. We are siphoning the wealth from the pockets. We talk about wealth creation and the need to sort of build wealth. Well, when people are unable to maintain their resources because they're paying more for prescription medications, for surgeries and procedures, because their local and state tax burden is so high, it is preventing us from developing the kind of wealth that we want to have. So modern monetary theory has a range of benefits that would benefit the communities that we serve and address the issues that we face today, issues that are the legacies of our history of slavery and Jim Crow segregation. And if we want to address these issues, if we want to have true reparative economic justice, it must come through the prism of understanding modern monetary theory. MMT is not an alternative economic system. It is merely a description of how our economy works right now. And if Donald Trump, if the Republicans can use MMT to give $2 trillion in tax cuts to the rich and say nothing about deficits or the federal debt, we need to harness that space today to address the issues in our communities and that the issues that our people are facing today. It has truly changed my understanding of what's possible if we're going to make our world and our society a more equitable place. It is by understanding modern monetary theory. I want to give all of your listeners a book to read. If you have not read the book, The Deficit Myth, it is written by economist Stephanie Kelton. It came out in June of 2028. Get The Deficit Myth. It'll really change your understanding of the fiscal policy capacity of the federal government. It'll give you a basic outline of modern monetary theory. It's written in a way that's accessible to non-specialists in the field. And I also want to encourage you to get two other books, if I can give them to you, Daren.
Yep.
The first is The Case for a Federal Job Guarantee by economist Pavlina Cherneva, The Case for a Federal Job Guarantee. And the third is Racial Taxation by scholar Camille Walsh. It helps us to understand that this whole dog whistle of relying on taxpayer dollars and this focus on taxes to fund spending is really a legacy of the country's history of racism against funding priorities that benefit the poor and Black and brown people in the country. We've got to shift, even progressives, we got to shift from that model so we can have a better society.
Dr. Delman Coates, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much. A lot of helpful information. Dr. Delman Coates, founder of Our Money, thank you for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you so much. Go to ourmoneyus.org.
All righty. And with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more show right after these messages.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand. stand. Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting BronxNet, this is Daren.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back to the show. Small businesses have suffered tremendously due to the financial fallout caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, for mandatory shutdowns, social distancing, as well as COVID restrictions, many business owners actually wonder whether or not their doors are going to be able to stay open following this reopening and being able to resume service. Recently, the New York City Council passed 2 bills easing fines for code violations in an effort to provide relief to small businesses and then also to help the city's economy recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us to tell their point of view on the matter, I'm joined by the executive director of the 3rd Avenue BID, Michael Brady. And for those people who don't know what the BID is, BID stands for a Business Improvement District. Michael, as always, good to have you here, my friend, being with us.
Good to be here again. Thank you so much for having me.
I think it's safe to say that you and I have had conversations in a little bit more tougher times and a little worse times, but
absolutely
right. You know, and right now we do sense that things are getting a little bit better. Talk to us about just where you see things right now as we are coming out of or better out of this COVID crisis.
Sure. You know, I think, you know, New York City businesses as a whole have been, you know, really throttled with the COVID-19 pandemic, but the Bronx in particular, largely due to just the mom and pop, you know, context of our businesses. But I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we're seeing unemployment rates slowly go down. We're seeing the private sector workforce come back. Tourism is coming back slowly. You know, the number of folks in the city who are on unemployment is slowly going down. So we're seeing some of the signs of recovery, and we're seeing some businesses that are reopening and some new businesses that are coming online. But you know, it's still a tough time ahead. You know, New York City's initial response for small businesses when the pandemic hit was anemic, to say the best. You know, and the federal response while it has been helpful, it was also very delayed, and we lost a lot of businesses because of those delays. And now I think we're up against it in, it's time for the federal government to double down on its commitment to small businesses and renew things like the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It's time for the city of New York to really take on regulations and give small businesses the respect that they deserve. I mean, small businesses employ over 50% of the city's workforce, contribute over $30 billion to our tax base. And up until recently, they've just been seen as being the city's cash cow. And it's time for the city to assist the cash cow, because we really need the help.
Yeah. When we talk about where we are right now, as far as the Bronx is concerned, we know the small business is the lifeblood of the city. The Bronx not receiving much help by way of PPP and financial assistance the first time around. Walk us through just a little bit for a second and just give us a little bit about where we are here in terms of the second round and businesses possibly being able to be stabilized because of this. Or what can you tell us?
Yeah, I think the first round of the Paycheck Protection Program, really assisted a lot of large businesses. It didn't really drill down and assist small businesses as much as we had hoped. The second round, we are seeing some better numbers on that. However, it's really still not enough because PPP came in at a time after we already lost about a quarter of our businesses. So it did help slow the bleeding, but there's still a lot of bleeding happening, particularly in the hospitality sector, which is trying to claw its way back, but it's so arduous and so slow. And the bills don't stop. Rent doesn't stop, insurance doesn't stop, payroll doesn't stop. But unfortunately, it seems like the federal assistance and the assistance from state and local governments is very slowly trickling, and I don't think that it is happening fast enough to prevent the hemorrhaging that's happening.
Yeah. As we look right now, we know that COVID-19 restrictions are being lifted. There's going to be more flexibility. You've got restaurants who are saying, thank you for the opportunity to really be able to reopen their doors. But really, these restrictions themselves have really impacted restaurants in a far greater way than a lot of other areas. The restaurants in your area, what have you heard from them with regards to the lifting of these restrictions?
I think the restaurants are grateful that the restrictions were lifted. I think a lot of them had really hoped that they would be lifted sooner, but nonetheless, they are lifted now. But I think right now we're restaurants in particular are coming against some real market conditions. For example, the cost of food is skyrocketing, so that means the price on your menu is going to increase, which means people are most likely going to be less likely to go out and eat and drink. I don't know if you've been out to a bar recently, but to get a bottle of mid-level vodka, or not bottle, God, not a bottle, but a glass of mid-level vodka on the rocks is running you about $15. That's a lot of money, particularly for working families who want to go out and have a good time. So while the city is slowly reopening, we really need to take a look at what the other unintended consequences of the pandemic are. The cost of gas, the cost of food, all of that's impacting a family's ability to really go out and patronize bars, restaurants, and even small businesses.
And when we talk about fund did close, and so give us a little bit about that. What can you tell us about the revitalization fund?
Sure. So the Restaurant Revitalization Fund was established by the federal government. Thank you to Chuck Schumer, who really helped push that through for us. And it was a $28 billion grant fund to assist restaurants and bars in the United States with covering things like rent and payroll and other operating expenses. However, the demand was so great that the fund closed almost as quick as it had opened. And that's been really tough. There's currently, I think, 205,000 applications in the queue with the Small Business Administration that haven't been really reviewed because there's no money. So last week, all the applicants received an email saying, hey, the fund is closed because we have no more money. We need the federal government to re-up the money. So over the past 4 weeks, we've been working closely with the Senate and House to ask them to contribute $60 billion to the fund to at least clear out that backlog of applications. And it's our hope that they'll hopefully move on that soon. If not, I think we'll see that a lot of our small mom and pop, local favorite restaurants who've really held on and, been fighting tooth and nail will eventually be making the decision to close. I think between the lack of federal support from the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and then, policies that the state has just let expire, for example, alcohol to go, which has really been, a big support for small businesses, particularly restaurants. They've let that expire, so no one can do that anymore. So I think this confluence of lack of resources and policy decisions have really put small businesses, particularly restaurants, in a tough position. So
you and I could talk about this all day. I mean, we have talked about this literally all day when it comes to certain things. My concern would be for, you talked about mom and pop businesses and applications. And while there is a closing of the applications, we know that in mom and pop businesses and sometimes businesses that don't necessarily have their paperwork together, they could have honestly missed out on this opportunity. Talk to us about where we are in terms of helping people, that mom and pop business that may not have that great front end skill, that may not have the great administrative skill, but definitely needs the help. What's in place for those people who are watching right now and saying, listen, you know what, I got a business, but I know my paperwork isn't in order and I really don't have the application skill set?
That's right. No, I think, Daren, you hit it right on the head. I think the local, state, and federal government thinks that our businesses run these pristine shops that have amazing back-end, HR and finances and all of this. But the reality is a lot of small businesses are really run on like 2 or 3 people, and they can barely keep their head above water with regulations, let alone all the paperwork that's associated with being a business. So I think step one for that business that's watching right now is take a breath. And it's okay to talk about it. Like, I think so many businesses have this stigma that my paperwork's not together, I can't do anything, and they get easily overwhelmed. It's okay, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who don't have their paperwork together. There are a lot of people who may not be up to date on their taxes or whatever, filing with Department of State, and that's okay, because we can create a plan and we can work on that together. Now, unfortunately, the Restaurant Revitalization program is closed right now, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to reopen. So what I would say to those small businesses is, contact the 3rd Avenue Business Improvement District or the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and we will walk through with you step by step and help you get your financial house in order, help you get your paperwork in order. So when the fund does reopen, or if there are other opportunities available, you'll be ready for that on day one. And we've been doing that since the first round of PPP offerings, and we've been consistently doing that and providing those services throughout the past year and a half. We partnered with the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership and the Bronx Community Foundation to help enhance those efforts, and the Bronx Business Organization Coalition has provided numerous webinars, one-on-one services. The New York City Hospitality Alliance has done some great work on this. So there are definitely resources here for folks, but I think the first step is to say, okay, my stuff's not together, and that's okay. And then we can create a roadmap to get all the paperwork together so you can apply for these opportunities.
Are you satisfied that there's enough legislation in place to really be able to protect small businesses during this time?
No, I think no. I don't think that small businesses have been a priority for New York City for quite some time. And I think the city has just looked at small businesses as being the proverbial piggy bank to finance city initiatives. And there haven't been enough protections put in place to protect brick and mortar small businesses. And what we've seen over the past 5 years coming out of the city council of, and it's really terrible. But like all things in New York City, once elected officials are termed out or they're no longer elected officials, it's not their problem anymore, which is really disheartening because small businesses are here to stay. Business organizations like your chambers, your business improvement districts, they're here to stay. They have the longevity and the sustainability that an elected official or politician does not have. And I think it's time for New York City to really get serious about small businesses. We can't sit here and say that small businesses are the backbone and life of our city if we're not really going to support them, both legislatively and through other opportunities.
So where do we go from here when you look at the fact that we're coming out of this slowly but surely. And you got businesses who are saying, we're not coming out of this at all. Our doors are going to be closing. And if not, our doors are going to be closing. We're going to have to make some severe modifications. So what are you hearing as the head of your business improvement district as some of the front and center things need to be addressed?
Sure. I think number one is rent negotiations for owed back rent. I know that the state has released their rental assistance program, but the assistance program is very difficult to qualify and navigate. If you're a first generation business owner or a non-English speaking business owner, it's not the easiest thing to qualify for, even if you are one of the most robust businesses in the city. So I think, handling that is really, really very important. I apologize about the background noise, but we're in the hub, so.
And we're virtual, buddy, so this is what we get anytime we get virtual. You're live listening to anything. So taking that, trust me, compared to some of the stuff we've seen and heard, you're okay. Go right ahead.
So I think, handling rent negotiations is going to be is huge. And it's something that everyone's just sidestepped or kicked the can down the road. We only hear about rent when the governor's moratorium is about to expire, and then he adds an extra month on or an extra couple of weeks. That's not addressing the issue. I think secondarily, we really have to focus on entrepreneurship. There are a lot of vacancies. There are a lot of empty office spaces. There are a lot of restaurants that need new restaurateurs to occupy the space. We need to seriously come up with a program that addresses entrepreneurship in a meaningful way. And I think that part of that would include, the city of New York or the state or the federal government front-ending 6 months of rent for a small business and helping them out with the bureaucracy and the red tape so that people can actually get open faster and start generating revenue. And then I think on the federal side, we have to make sure that Americans have money in their pocket to spend. The first and second round stimulus was fine, but let's be honest, $1,200 in New York City doesn't really even cover your first, your a month of rent. So, I think that we have to really take a look at how we can make sure people have cash in their pockets, and whether that's taking a serious look at the minimum wage or developing really substantial and substantive workforce programs. We have to make sure that people can spend at our small businesses. If not, we're putting lipstick on the pig, so to speak.
So you talked about entrepreneurship in this last question that I asked you. I mean, let's be honest. With all that we got going on, why would it be good to be an entrepreneur during this time, especially if, I'm a business and I'm watching what's going on with small businesses? Give me your take.
So I think that there are a few opportunities here that, someone who's very shrewd and financially savvy could take advantage of. One, it's a renter's market right now. Property values and rents are decreasing. Because the property owner wants to fill those spaces. So I think that negotiating a good rent and a long-term lease is really important. I think that folks may, depending on where they are, they may see some market gaps, which a small business could really take advantage of. And I think thirdly, the need for so much space is very different now. I would imagine that a retail environment that's opening today could and should focus more on their e-commerce development and marketplace development, as opposed to just their brick and mortar development. I think that we've seen a substantial shift in the retail landscape, and we're finding that more and more folks are doing online orders than they are actually going into the store. Like, for example, today it's 100 degrees out. I don't know who's going to come out today and say, oh, I'm going to go and get that brand new shirt, when they can just go onto the store's website and buy the shirt that way. So I think, those are some opportunities. I think that there's definitely a genuine fear. The Delta variant, I think, is something that's in the back of folks' minds of like, is all of this going to happen again? What will we have to do? How can I protect my investment? How can I? Entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs in the Bronx and New York City, are fighters. They fought for the past year and a half, and they're going to fight some more. And it's my hope that the city can properly invest in them to make sure that small businesses continue to be the backbone of New York City.
I'll put it like this: after this winter that we've had, I will put my mask on and get that $10 shirt in 100-degree heat, since I've been in the house
That's
so
it.
long. That's it.
That's right.
We're making light of the situation, but it's very real. And I think for businesses, and you tell me right there in your area, they got to be excited to really see people back on the streets.
I think so. The hub is a huge transportation center. We see about 400,000 people here a day. And I think businesses are excited to see the life on the street again. They're excited to see bid programs back in full swing with live music and special events and things of that sort. I think that folks are so eager to make sure that people are coming into their shops and things. Now we just have to do the right thing on our end to make sure that people that are going shopping have money in their pocket to spend. And I think of all the neighborhoods in the Bronx, the South Bronx particularly, we really have to focus on that neighborhood wealth development to make sure that the next pandemic or the next crisis that happens, the Bronx isn't left out of the equation again. I think that we're very tired of just getting the crumbs, and now we want the whole pie.
Yeah. Have you been pleased by what you're hearing politically? I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, new faces. Are you optimistic that the Bronx will be well represented first from the city, and then also getting a good look from the borough president, incoming borough president?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very hopeful about the city council races that were just called yesterday. I think that there's a lot of new energy and new blood that will be coming to the city council. But with that new energy and new blood, I think there also needs to be some elected education. Folks need to know what's what and what the reality on the ground is. So I think that's one thing that I'm really hopeful about. I think the mayor's race, Eric Adams and Catherine Garcia and Maya Wiley, they all ran fantastic races, and any of them would be really qualified candidates to represent our city. But I think it's going to be about the people who they surround themselves with. Because I think we all know that a lot of the work is done by commissioners, deputy mayors, and frontline staffers. And then in terms of borough president, I'm extraordinarily grateful to Vanessa Gibson for her leadership in the city council and the assembly. And I know that she'll do great things as our borough president, from land use to being the borough's cheerleader, to making sure that, budgetary line items go where they need to go. Councilmember Gibson was one of the lead sponsors on recent legislation in the city council that reduced fines for small businesses as a result of COVID-19. So, I think her heart is definitely in the right place. And I think she'll do well to represent the borough.
Yeah, gotta let you go. But just before we go, tell us some final thoughts as what you'd like us to go home with.
Sure. I think if you're a small business and you're struggling, reach out to the 3rd Avenue Bid, reach out to the Bronx Chamber, reach out to your local business organization. We're here to help. Don't be embarrassed by anything. We've seen it all. So don't be embarrassed by that, and have a little hope. We're coming out of it. This is the summer of New York City. So let's have some hope, and also take things with a grain of salt, and don't beat yourself up so much. It's been a hard year and a half. Everyone deserves a break right now.
Yeah. We've rocked out this year and a half together, Michael. Good to have you here with us, and certainly continue to come on back and let us know how things are progressing.
Great. Thank you so much, Daren. Appreciate you.
All righty, Michael Brady from the 3rd Avenue Business Improvement District. And yes, it has been some improvement over the course of the last 16 months. And Michael, I'm just glad that we're moving in the direction called better. Well, listen, that about wraps it up for us here on the Social Justice Forums. We definitely want you to join us next week when we take the time to elevate the conversation and then again, highlight some of the inequities and the things that you need to know in order to make our community better and more equal. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. God bless.